There are some factors that learning is possible through these factors only. Learning is change in behavior or changing in performance. First important factor of learning is there should be some change in behavior and there should be some change in the performance of any individual. That is number one factor. Factor one in learning, there are some factors of learning. First and foremost factor is learning is change in behavior. So we need to acknowledge some change in behavior after learning or some sort of change in his or her performance. So the important factors of learning is, you know, the exit behavior and entry behavior. Exit and entry behavior means when you entered into some course, maybe 2 years course or 3 years course or 4 years course, your behavior before entering into the course is known as entry behavior. After completion of your course of 2 years PG psychology or 3 years graduation or 4 years any professional course, after completion of your course, after 4 years course, your behavior is known as the exit behavior. That means there is some change in entry behavior and exit behavior before entering into the course of psychology. You may have some confusion. What will be there in the psychological courses? What will be there in the first year units? What will be there in the second? So you'll have some maybe confused or some sort of blank in your mind. So that behavior is known as the entry behavior. That is before knowing something, before joining in any course. But after completion of your master's course, you will have full-fledged knowledge of the psychology, at least to some extent. So that is change in behavior. After learning something from this course, after learning something from your experience, after learning something from this topic, your behavior will be changing. That means you will empowered with some sort of knowledge after completion of your learning process. Same way, performance. Number one, the first important factor of learning is change in behavior. Number two is change in performance also. You will perform means before learning is somehow it is different. After completion of your learning, after learn something from your experience, after learn something from your books, after learn something from your that is lectures or classes, your performance will be better performance. So this is the second factor of learning. Learning is depending on some factors. That learning is change in behavior, learning is changing in performance, and learning is change in memory also. So you will memorize the thing, whatever you learned, whatever you experienced. So learning is change in memory, and learning is the result of experience. Other important factor of learning is result of experience. So you learn something out of your experience. This is a result of experience. And always learning is relatively permanent. Whatever you learned, whatever you experience, it's a permanent. It's not a temporary. Actually, if you learn something, that is the permanent change in behavior, permanent change in memory, permanent change in performance. These are all some important factors, some important points related to the learning. Then there are some assumptions in learning. Observe. So these, what are the learning, the behavior of change in any person, individual, you can easily observe. So this is known as the observable behavior rather than internal behavior. So in this learning process, you will find, you will acknowledge, you will notice some observable behavior. Maybe some internal thought process may be changed. Those internal thought process, changing of your memory, changing of your experience, changing of your behavior. This is outerly. Externally, you can find out. Externally, you can acknowledge. So observable behavior, you'll find observable behavior in the learning process. Then the environment shapes one behavior. Whatever the things you learn from environment, that may be your family environment, that may be from your education environment, that may be your organization environment. If you learn something that can be observed, means you can easily observe the person's behavior by learning something from the environment or by learning something from the workplace or any education institutions, that is environment of this education institution. So learning is observer behavior. The environment maybe modifies the behavior of any person. The environment means that, as I mentioned, the family environment, the organization environment, the school environment, the college environment, or any type of environment. This environment modifies the behavior of any person. Okay, so here and some theories of learning. One is important theory, that is Thorndike's trial and error theory, number one. So Thorndike trial and error theory, number one. Number two is classical conditioning theory. Number three is operant conditioning theory. Another one is the social learning theory. I repeat, there are some theories of learning. One is trial and error theory of Edward Thorndike. Number two is classical conditioning theory of Ivan Pavlov. Number four is operational conditioning theory of Skinner. Then social learning theory. So these are some theories of learning. So first one is that in connectionism. So in Edward Thorndike learning theory, that is known as the connection theory. Connection. What is the learning theory of Thorndike represents the stimulus and response framework of behavior. So here, stimulus and response, the connection between the stimulus and response is the most influential factors, most influential aspects of the learning. So here in this trial and error theory, learning requires both practice and rewards. In trial and error theory of Edward Thorndike, so here S and R, what is S and S means stimulus, R is the response. The connection between the stimulus and response. So based on the connection between the stimulus and response, the process of learning is possible. According to the Edward Thorndike's trial and error theory, if the trials are more, the errors will be less. While the trials are increasing, errors will be decreased. For example, in initial stages of education, one curriculum will be there in the LKG, UKG, and even first standard also. That is known as the cursive copywriting. In the cursive copywriting, one clear-cut sentence will be written on the first line of their copy, or the copy, that is page. So in the first line of that is their cursive copy, so clear cut, very neatly, clearly written sentence will be given. Okay, in the clear cut written this sentence, for example, or not, maybe it is one word will be given. Mental health and physical health is important. That is the one sentence written in the first line. So by seeing that sentence, the child is supposed to write the same sentence in the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and so on lines. When they write on the first line, by copying that line, by copying that sentence, the first trial, they'll have so many mistakes. For example, the errors will be somehow it is. For example, the 6 errors are there on the first sentence or first attempts or first trial. On the first trial, there are some, assume that some 6 errors. In the second line, okay, for example, written in the healthy mind in the healthy body. That is the first sentence written on the first line. The sentence written on the first line. By copying that is line or sentence, they need to write first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and so on lines in the same page, the same cursive copywriting. What happens when the child written on the first line. So some mistakes, some errors will be observed. So for example, if the number of errors are 6 on the first line, if you take the second line, if you appear the second line of that cursive copy, so by writing the second line, by practicing the second line, what happens? The errors may be somehow decreased. So in the first line, errors are more. In the second line, errors are maybe somehow it is 4 or 3. Third line means the trials are increasing, errors are decreasing. So here in the trial and error theory, when the trials are increasing, the errors will be decreased. So here connectionism between the series of S are stimulus and response. Okay, so learning requires both practice and rewards. If you say very good to the child, what happens? That very good, whatever the reward means, it may be oral reward. So that may be oral reward of giving very good, or by saying very good, she or he will try to practice in a better manner, so that errors will be decreased. If the trials are increasing, errors will be decreased. So in the trial and error theory, he explains the connection between the stimulus and response. So here, so again, there are some important 3 sub principles of this main trial and error theory. Number 1, law of exercise. Number 2, law of readiness. Number 3, law of effect. I repeat, trial and error theory is propounded by Edward L. Thorndike. In this trial and error theory, if the trials are increases, errors will be decreased. And the connection between the stimulus and response is mentioned in this theory. Okay. Again, there are some 3 sub principles of this theory. Number 1, law of readiness. Number 2, law of exercise. Number 3, law of effect. Law of readiness means, so physically, psychologically, and emotionally, the individual to be ready to learn something. Without physical, mental readiness, learning process may not be a smooth manner. So that is called law of readiness. Readiness means a person is to be ready physically, psychologically, and emotionally to learn something. Then only it is possible to learn those things. That is called law of readiness. Number 2 is law of exercise. By doing so many trials, so or you can say practices. Practices are important, practices are essential. By doing practice only, something can be learned. So first one is law of readiness. Physical readiness, psychological readiness, and emotional readiness is required to learn something. Number 2 is that law of exercise. So by doing some exercise, by doing some practices, learning is possible. Learning is possible through some experiences. That is also known as the law of exercise or law of practice. Third one is law of effect, or you can say law of result. If you think some effect will be there after learning, then only it is possible to learn. We will, if you want to do something, if you want to perform something, there should be some result, effect. By understanding the effect, by acknowledging the result, by your expectation only, you will learn something. That is known as the law of effect. For example, if you are doing your PG psychology, means something you are expecting. So your expectation is something, some result you need. After completion of your master's degree in psychology, you want to get job in the psychological field. That is the result your expectation. You are expecting that result, because if you get something, then only you are doing something, that you learn something. So law of readiness is the first sub-principle of E.L. Thorndike's theory. Then law of exercise, a law of practice. Number three is the law of result or law of practice. Okay. Then another important thing is there are some cognitive orientation to learning. So first component of behavior is the cognitive component. Second is the affective component. Third is the cognitive component. So in this cognitive orientation to learning means psychologists were happy with behaviorism. So here, so cognition means thought process. So when you understand, I'll have some positive aspect, some positive impact of this learning. Then only if you analyze in a positive way, if you understand in a positive way, then only you will try to learn something. Otherwise, you won't learn it. Okay, so that is the reason before the starting any class, it may be the school level classes or higher level, higher education classes. So they will give some sort of instruction to be well organized. Well organized materials easier to learn and to remember. So if the systematic way of things are organized, then only it is easy to learn something. So well systematically organized maybe topics, systematically organized material, they'll give some sort of motivation to learn something. Okay. So what are the instructions to be properly organized material or instructions for example, if you are lecturing maybe any class, maybe PG psychology. So for example, today our explanation is that it is the learning. After that, factors of learning. Then there are some theories of learning. Then sub principles of learning. This is the organized way of explaining the things, so that the learning process will be in a smooth and systematic way. Even though if it is a practical way of learning something, what are the material needed in the practice or practical? So systematically to be organized, the instructions of the material should be properly maybe or maybe orally explained. For example, school related what happens? So motivation, they will do the motivation first. Okay? For example, if they want to explain the to explain something, so their methodology will be like that. Within 5 to 10 minutes of the class or 15 minutes, 50 minutes, at least 5 minutes or 10 minutes, the teacher or lecturer is allotted to the introductory part, that is motivational class. Then after that, main topic, what are the topics they wanted to explain, they will explain in a orderly way. For example, if it is a practical class, like chemistry practical, psychology practical classes, or physics practical, what are the material needed there? What are the material is essential there to explain that class? So what happens? They will arrange in a systematic way. Then only it is possible to show that practical instrument. Okay, so number one is that systemized way of materialistic organization. Maybe instructions may be clearly, structurally, we need to explain to give the proper learning environment. So in the cognitive orientation, first one is the instructions to be given in a systematic way. What are the material? So we better to arrange the material in a proper way. And prior knowledge is important. So learning is nothing but linkage of the previous learned aspect to the latest aspects. With any class, for example, if you are in the psychology class, you know so many things. So always learning to be known to unknown things. You know something, and what are the unknown things that to be linked with the known things. So always the known things leads to unknown things. What are the known things? What are the material you know? What are the things you know? Based on the known things, we will explain the unknown aspects. Okay, that is what are the prior knowledge It is important. We need to know already what are the things you know in your previous classes. What are the things you have an idea? Better to tap those things, and you need to add some new things in the learning process. Okay, so instructions to be well organized, instructions to be clearly structured. Then prior knowledge is important. What are the knowledge you have before practicing something, before knowing something, before learning something? Whatever you know, that means what are the known things to be linked to the unknown. It is a quite common process. It's a quite general process, any class. So prior knowledge is important. So then difference between the individuals are important in the learning process. Learning is, of course, learning is a continuous process. Learning is a unique process, but need to know there are some individual differences in the learning process. For example, some individuals may be easily grasped when the teaching is going on, when the lecturing is going on. Some students, some individuals may take some more time to understand the things, to learn things. So the difference between the individuals and individuals are most important thing. So the effect of learning is not same to all individuals. The procedure of learning things is differs or variation from one to another. So differences in cognitive style or methods of approach influence learning. So whatever we understand, you know that cognition means understanding capacity, knowledge, perception. This all comes under the cognitive. That is thought process. The perception may be differ from one individual to another individual. The understanding capabilities may be differ from one person to another person. The memory may be differ from one to another person. The understandable capabilities, the knowledge. So these things may be vary from one individual to another individual. So difference between individuals and are most influential factor from one to another thing. So these are all the various principles of cognitive orientation to learning. I repeat, instructions to be well organized so that the learning process will be smooth. Then the material should be organized so that the learning process will be systematically and smooth way. Then individual difference from one to another to be organized. We need to learn, and prior knowledge is important. So how the perceptual features of the task also important. How the perception of each individual, that we need to understand before starting our learning process. So I repeat, first one is learning, then factors of learning, then some theories of learning. This Thorndike error theory, one is important, that is this is known as the trial and error theory of learning. The emphasis on random movements. The more number of trials taken to complete the task, lesser will be the errors. So if the trials are more, that is errors will be less. Or you can see when the trials are increased, the number of errors will be decreased. That is one important concept of trial and error theory. Then second one is associative learning. Associative learning, learning that certain events go together. There are two kinds of associative learning, the classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Associative learning means when we learn something automatically, some other aspects also can be learned with the association of the first thing. That is number one. Then in this transfer of learning also can. Transfer of learning, there are three important types of transfer of learning. First, what is transfer of learning? Whatever you learn, if you transfer this learned concepts, if you transfer this learned experience in various situations, various environment, different environment, that is known as the transfer of learning. In the transfer of learning also, there are three types of transfer of learning. One is positive transfer of learning. Second is negative transfer of learning. Third is zero transfer of learning, or you can say null transfer of learning. Positive transfer of learning means whatever you learned, if that learned aspects positively impact the learning in the various aspects. For example, some individuals learned how to type machine, that is keyboard operation. The keyboard, if they learned by doing some type work, the same keyboard operating is easy in the operating of the computer keyboard. So whatever they learned in the previous time, the impact will be positive on the second learned aspects. That is known as the positive transfer of learning. Second is negative transfer of learning. If the person is well known about he's well versed about the Sanskrit, he is fluent in the Sanskrit, but the Sanskrit fluency is not give positive impact on the learning of English language or German language or French language, because there is no similarity between these two aspects. That means whatever they learn in the initial stage, that will give some sort of negative impact or hurdles on the learning of the second part. That means negative transfer of learning. Okay. Third one is that zero transfer of learning. There is no negative, no positive. Both are different. Like sports.
Sir, voice not audible, sir.
So you're not audible.
Hello.
Yeah, can you hear?
Hello. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we
Am I
can
audible?
hear you now.
Yeah. So here in this important topic of trial and error theory, as I mentioned, trials are increased, errors will be decreased. Then in transfer of learning also, there are three important types of transfer of learning, as I mentioned. One is positive transfer of learning. Second is negative transfer of learning. Third is the zero transfer of learning. Okay. So then next one is the behavioral theory. Behavioral theories, there are two important behavioral theories. One is classical conditioning theory of Evans Pavlov. Then second one is the operant conditioning theory of Skinner's. Okay. So here in classical conditioning theory, the emphasis on the response after the stimulus. Stimulus is when the stimulus is present, when the stimulus is there, how the response that will be observed in the classical conditioning theory. Okay, so in Thorndike error theory, as I mentioned, there are some laws or principles of Thorndike theory: law of effect, law of exercise, law of readiness. Okay, and another sub principle of this theory is law of recency. Recency means, so what are the recent examples if you give in the classroom, in the learning process, that will be more effective in case of learning. Okay, so these are all the sub principles of trial and error theory. I repeat, trial and error theory of E.L. Thorndike. That is, number one is that trials are, when the trials are increases, errors will be decreased. That is number one. Associative learning. So there are some associative aspects of learning, and there are some transfer of learning. There are some types of transfer of learning. Okay. So sub principles of E.L. Thorndike is that one is law of effect, law of readiness, law of exercise, law of recency. Okay. Now, classical conditioning theory. Classical conditioning theory. The classical conditioning theory. So the stimulus and response. How the stimulus, how the response, the link, the connection between the stimulus and response is mentioned in this classical conditioning theory. So one experiment is mentioned in this classical conditioning theory. So here one, that is, so animal like dog is here the subject in the experiment of classical conditioning theory of Ivan Pavlov. So here, so first initially without any conditioning, so the food will be provided to the dog. So whatever the food providing to the dog or animal, the salvia will be, no, the salvia will be measured. Okay, so initially without any conditions, they provide the food to the animal, this dog. So whatever the salvia is from the dog mouth, so they measure that one. The quantity of the salvia by providing that food, they noticed and they observed and they noted. Number one. After some at least some trials, or you can say some instance of providing food. So now before providing that food, they give some sort of condition, means some sort of sound, or you can say bell sound. Okay, so the experiment is that first of all, in the first case, in the first instant, first stage, without any condition, providing the food to the animal. Secondly, before some seconds of providing food, they give some sort of sound, be bell sound. That means some sort of condition to provide that food. This condition is given. That means condition. First one is unconditional stimulus, then unconditional response. Now the conditional stimulus along with the unconditional stimulus. So ringing the bell, then provide the food. Some sort of creating some sort of sound, then only food is provided. The conditioning is that before getting the food, before providing the food, this type of sound is to be mentioned. That is the conditioning. Then after some trials, after some instance, some stage of some time, then this only sound of bell, no food. That is the unconditional. First one is unconditional stimulus, then conditional stimulus. Then finally, only conditional stimulus. In all the three cases, in this experiment, by providing food first, then providing food with some condition of sound. Then no food, only conditioning. That means third stage. In all these cases, they observe the quantity of salvia from that animal. Okay, that is the actual experiment. How to provide the food without any condition, providing the food with some condition, then no food, only conditional stimulation. In all these three cases, in all these three instances, in all these three stages, in all these three experiments, so whatever the quantity of the salvia is measured in the measuring jar, they observed the salvia is the same quantity of salvia they observed in the three. That is the classical conditioning theory experiment of Evans.
What you are thinking on saying this when I go out with the PG right hand side, left hand side. You are saying this, not that one. Right hand. Third one
And
is
second, another theory of behavior is Skinner's experiment theory. Skinner's experiment. The Skinner experiment also some sort of animal, maybe rat or pigeon. They use in this theory. In this theory of operant conditioning, operations means activities. Some activities are given to that animal, that may be pigeon or rat. So by getting food,
but I wanted to
some
join
sort
the
of
big,
activity,
not the
sort
crowd
of
one, but
operations. In these operations, initially the rat approached the
please
food.
mute yourself.
In the initial stage, so when they get the food, so they'll get some sort of positive reinforcement. By positive reinforcement, they try to get the food in an easy manner. Okay, so whenever the modification of behavior is possible, means when the activities are done, you need to do some sort of positive reinforcement. Okay, if even in any case, even the child's behavior also, if they modify their behavior, better to provide positive reinforcement to strengthening that behavior. So if the odd behavior, abnormal behavior, if you observe, if you train the child, if you train an individual to modify his behavior, if he modifies his abnormal behavior to normal behavior, we need to give some sort of positive reinforcement to strengthening the normal behavior. So in the same way, if the behavior is not modified, the same abnormal behavior, the same problematic behavior is observed in the same individual, what to do? Negative reinforcement. The negative, positive reinforcement means providing something or giving some positive verbal things. Okay, if it is that is negative reinforcement means if the behavior is not modified, the same abnormal, same this problematic behavior is showing by the individual, we need to give some sort of negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement means whatever the things it is helpful to that, that is important, needful to the child or the person. We better to slowly reducing that or withdraw those things. So here, positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement mentioned in this theory of operant conditioning. Operations means activities, some activities to be learned from this individual, so that the modification of behavior is possible. In any case of behavior modification, I can say BMP, BMT, behavior modification techniques and behavior modification program, generally we use these type of negative reinforcement as well as the positive reinforcement. So in this both theories, like Skinner's theory of operant conditioning or Pavlov's conditioning theory of classical, means Pavlov's classical conditioning theory, one experiment is mentioned in the operant conditioning theory of Skinner, another experiment. In all these theories, it may be classical conditioning theory, it may be operant conditioning theory, that may be trial and error theory, what happens in any theory, the connection we need to observe, the connection between the stimulus and response. Here in this first example, stimulus is providing the food, that is the stimulus. Response is the quantity of salvia from this dog's mouth or from this animal. So that is the response. The connection between the stimulus and response is that is the reason we call it as a series of connection theories. The connection means between the stimulus and response. So when the trials are decreased, you will give some sort of positive reinforcement. By doing positive reinforcement, the response will be in a positive way. So in all these theories, the connection between the stimulus and response, as I mentioned, here in this case of providing food, that is the stimulus in the classical conditioning theory, and that is salvia is the response. If you provide unconditional stimulus, unconditional response, unconditional stimulus along with the conditional, unconditional, then only conditional stimulus, the conditional response. That means response is based on the stimulus in this theory. I mean the connection between the stimulus and response. So learning requires both practice and reward. So a series of SR connection, this type of series, it gives some sort of modification of its theory. That means learning. And in some cases, repetition of the same stimulus also modifies or shaping the behavior of any individual. So in the behaviorist theories of learning, maybe the Thorndike's trial and error theory of learning, Pavlov's classical conditioning theory of learning, Skinner's operation conditioning theory of learning. In all these theories, as I mentioned, the connection between stimulus and response to be observed. So here, on another important experiment Pavlov's given. So here, first of all, he provide food. And another step, second stage, before providing the food, some type of light or bulb. Maybe it may be the visual, it may be the audio. Visual means by switch on some sort of bulb or you can say light. That is unconditional stimulus is the food. Conditional stimulus is the light or sound of bell. Okay. So before conditioning, only light, no response from that particular animal. Then by providing food, the response is that salivation. Then the second one, first one is before conditioning. Second one is the condition during conditioning. Conditional stimulus is light, unconditional stimulus is the food. Then unconditional response of salivation. Then after conditioning, only light. So as I mentioned, there are three stages. One is before conditioning, then during conditioning, then after conditioning. Even only with the light also, you will get the same sort of salivation, the same quantity of salivation, that is conditional response. With the conditional stimulus, no response. Unconditional stimulus of food, unconditional stimulus, salivation. Then conditional stimulus, light, and unconditional stimulus of food. Then salivation during conditioning. Then last stage is only light or only sound. That is conditional response. So here in all the three stages, you'll get the initial stage is the unconditional response with unconditional stimulus, unconditional stimulus, unconditional response, then conditional stimulus, conditional. That means the response is depending on the stimulus. Okay. Again, there are some other sub principles in this classical conditioning also. First one is generalization. Second is discrimination. What is generalization? So the light or sound is only the specific sound, for the specific sound only, the response is possible. Different sounds, if you create, different size of lighting, if you create, the response may not be observed. So they'll generalize the sounds. Oh, this is the sound. This is the same sound. This is the same sound. So no need of thinking any response. They won't give any response if these sounds are the same or different sounds are repeatedly the same sounds or same sounds. That means generalizing the concept. If they generalize that this is the only sound, this is only the nothing is possible, nothing will get from that sounds, nothing you will get from the lighting. So they won't respond. That means generalizing. Second one is discrimination. They will discriminate which sound is, through which sound we will get the food. Along with some sound, you will get the food. That means discrimination from one stimulus to another stimulus, one sound to another sound, one type of lighting to another type of lighting. That is known as the discrimination. So here the behavior modification, even the learning aspect also, if the same sort of, even in the school, even the teaching also, the same sort of voice from the teacher, the same type of tone from the lecturers, there may not be that much of response from the, that is the reason some sort of creative activities are needed in the learning process. One more thing, stimulus variation. That is also one important thing they will follow in the teaching learning process of any class. Creativity, creative aspects, creative examples, illustrations, and some sort of voice modulation also. Stimulus variation. For the stimulus variation, voice modulation is one important thing. So this type of variations or various stimulus is possible, automatically you'll get the different type of responses. Response is possible based on the stimulus. So these are all the various rules, various principles in the connectionism of stimulus and response. And in the classical conditioning theory, where the classical conditioning theory, stimulus is more, response is based on the stimulus. But whereas in the operant conditioning theory, response is important. Based on the response, we'll give some sort of positive reinforce. If you give the positive reinforce, means response, so that stimulus again will get some sort of stimulus. By getting food, by modifying his behavior, by changing of his performance, if you positively reinforce, then what happens? Automatically, the child or the individual try to do something more. Okay. So in another aspects of measures of operant conditioning, there are some different aspects, like some basic how to do the schedules in this reinforcement. One is fixed ratio. Fixed ratio means, for example, time intervals should be some ratio. For example, if you give the positive reinforces with the schedule of 10 minutes, after 20 minutes, then 30 minutes, or 40 minutes, 50 minutes. This is known as the fixed ratio. And this schedule of reinforcement occurs after a fixed number of non-reinforced. It is occurs every 20 days. For example, the ratio of non-reinforced to reinforced response is 20 to 1. That is one type of schedules, that means known as the fixed ratios. Then fixed intervals. The reinforcement follows the first response emitted after a fixed time period measured from the last reinforcement. For example, on a fixed interval schedule of 1 minute, No further reinforcement after following the reinforcement. Fixed ratios, fixed intervals, then variable ratios. Variable like the fixed ratio schedule reinforce occurs after specified number of non-reinforced responses. So, for example, a 20 to 1 variable ratio schedule might be produced by requiring the number of intervening responses. So, variable ratios, then variable intervals. I repeat, there are some 4 basic schedules in the operant conditioning theory. One is fixed ratio, second is fixed interval, third is variable ratio, fourth one is the variable intervals. Then again, there are different type of reinforcement. One is first order reinforcement, second is second order reinforcement. First order reinforcement means, for example, so eatable items. If the child or individual is they need some sort of eatable things. These eatable, those are needed to his survival. That is known as the first order reinforces. Second order reinforcements, play items. Play items are not that much of easy for his or for her survival. That is known as the second order
Time is completed. Yeah.
reinforces. So you need to check, you need to verify, you need to categorize what are those first order reinforces to the individual. So based on their need, based on their expectation, based on their requirement, we need to select the first order reinforces and the second order reinforces. Okay, so in this classical conditioning theory or even operant conditioning theory also, we need to select proper reinforcements. For example, if you want to change the modification of any, for example, restlessness is the abnormal behavior of any child. If you want to control the behavior that is abnormal behavior or problematic behavior of restlessness, what to do? You need to give, you need to explain, you need to give some sort of instruction. See, if you reduce this abnormal behavior, I will do this. Those type of instructions to be given to the child or individual. Initially, there are some levels of giving positive reinforces as well as the negative reinforces also. What to do? You need to explain. If you do this, if you modify this behavior, I will give this type of reinforcement. I will provide this. Those things you have to explain to the child or any individual. If he modifies his behavior, for example, if you instruct the child to modify his abnormal behavior of restlessness, roaming around, or disturbing others in the classroom. So we need to tell the child, if you modify his behavior, that means if you won't disturb the others, I will provide this. I will give this type of activity. That means maybe first order or second order. First order means providing some sort of food. Second order means giving some sort of play items. Or you can say give some pencil. So you can explain the child, if you sit properly for this time of 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it may be, I'll give the pencil as a reward. That means that is the positive reinforcement or second order reinforcement. If the child followed your instructions, what to do? And you need to give some time also. So 1 day or 2 days. If you maintain the same behavior, what to do? If you tell the child to sit properly in the classroom, if he follow your instruction and if you modify his odd behavior or abnormal behavior to normal behavior, so to strengthening that behavior of sitting properly in the classroom, we are providing some sort of positive reinforcement, means giving some reward. Maybe that reward that means moral rewards or some type of things you can do. Moral reward means very good for small children, very good. Or you can give some sort of pencil like that. So after doing this, after modifying his behavior, providing food is the first order reinforcement. Giving pencil or sharpener is the second order reinforcement. So that he will maintaining the same normal behavior for further period. That is the first level of giving. And the same behavior is showing that same modification of behavior is continuously for 1 week or 3 days or 5 days. You can tell him, you can tell her. If you follow the same type of, you show the same type of behavior for further 3 days or 5 days, so we will take you to a park, outing, or shopping. These are all the various reinforces we can apply in this modification of behavior. So in this all, see, these are all the theories that may be trial and error theory, classical conditioning theory, or operant conditioning theory. So final thing is that learning. What they learned here means how to modify his behavior. As I mentioned, so in learning process, one important thing is the changing of behavior or changing of performance. So before learning something, their performance is somehow low. After learning, their behavior is changing and their performance is some sort of increasing the performance, good performance, low performance in the previous time before learning. After learning, increasing the performance. As I mentioned initially, so learning is modification of behavior through training and experience. Modification of behavior through training and experience. We are training the child, we are providing some sort of training to the child, to the individual, so that he modify his behavior, he change his behavior. The change may be the permanent change. Before learning something, before attending the class of psychology, the performance of the individual may be low. After attending the classes of psychology, so his performance is increased. It is also comes under the learning. So finally, in this learning process, as I mentioned, some important factors to be observed. So learning is the permanent changing of behavior. Learning is changing of performance. Learning is influenced by the environment. Learning is observable. Learning is finally modification of behavior. In this learning, stimulus and response is main. That is the reason these theories are known as the connection theories. Connection means connectionism between the stimulus and response. In trial and error theory of right? If the trials are increased, errors will be decreased. I have given already some examples. In the classical conditioning theory of Ivan Pavlov, stimulus, there are 3 levels of stimulus. One is unconditional stimulus, then conditional stimulus with unconditional stimulus, then only conditional stimulus. So for unconditional stimulus, unconditional response. Then in unconditional stimulus, with food with some sort of bell sound or lighting. Okay. Conditional stimulus of light, unconditional stimulus of food. So unconditional response of salivation. Then conditional stimulus of light, unconditional stimulus of food. That is during conditional, unconditional response. Then in third stage, only light, no food. That means conditional stimulus. So the conditional response. That means response is depending on the stimulus. That is the reason, the connection between the response and the signal. Whereas in the operant conditioning, the operations or activities. So by doing some activities, by learning something, if the behavior is modified, providing some sort of positive reinforcement. That positive reinforcement gives some sort of strengthening to the same behavior of normal. Okay, so negative reinforcement to modify his abnormal behavior to the modified behavior. In the reinforcement also, first order reinforcement reinforces and second order reinforces. So finally in this reinforce also levels of process, we can say there are some levels of giving reinforces. That means ratios, fixed ratios, and fixed intervals. Variable ratio and variable intervals. In all these theories, like trial and error theory, classical conditioning theory, and the operant conditioning, in all these theories, so modification of behavior is possible. Modification of behavior means changing the abnormal behavior, changing the problematic behavior to the normal behavior. So generally, these type of conditioning theories are applied in the behavior modification program or behavior modification techniques of any psychological professional life. Anything? Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Anything you want to know?
No, sir.
That's it. Thank you.
Hello? Hello?
Yes. One.
Sir, is it? Hello?
I think sir left.
Yeah, he left. He left.
Okay.
Yeah, what is your doubt?
Hello?
Yeah, he left, Amma. What is your doubt?
Oh, that's okay. I'll ask sir and I'll come back. Thank you.
Hello? Anything you want to ask? Hello?
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. I am not in WhatsApp group, sir. Can you add me in that group?
Okay, I will. Actually, I am not admin side. So you just ask other students, your classmates.
No, actually, I did not attend offline classes also, so I don't know any of the numbers.
That sir, how he knows that? You ask anyone.
Okay, are you there in WhatsApp group, sir?
Who?
Hello.
Hello, good morning, sir.
Hello,
You
are you there in WhatsApp group, sir?
You are asking whom?
Hello.
Yeah, you are asking sir or anybody?
No, anybody. Sir is anyway not in the Zoom meeting
Huh?
now. I think he left.
So, that is why I'm telling you. If you know
Okay,
anyone, you just share your number. They will add your group in this group, right?
To whom should I share, sir?
Otherwise, you give me number. I will add this number.
Okay, actually this will be on YouTube. No, shall I share to you personally? In chatting box.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah,
Hello.
yeah, you can, Amma.
Okay. May I know your name, sir?
My name is Murli Mohan.